Hey Grace students, it's a pleasure to be with you again. Unfortunately, this is my second week in a row not being here in person, but hey, this is a cool way to connect. Technology is super advanced that in a way I can just kind of be there with you guys. Just to let you know, my heart is with you. I appreciate your prayers because I do feel much better. But hey, check it out, because I really want you guys to pay attention just for the next 10 minutes, because I have a short, quick little message about something called living water. Yes, living water. We've talked about that multiple times, and I want you guys to think about it, because living water is a really important aspect in the Bible. We see it in the Old Testament, we see it in Daniel, we hear it in Isaiah, it's in the Psalms, it's in the prophet Jeremiah, it's also in Ezekiel when it talks about that water that flows from the temple and continues to engulf the world, and the water as an analogy, as a representation of God's presence, God's people going about. And then we see it in the New Testament, and Jesus talks about himself being the living water. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about that passage in John 4 with Jesus and the Samaritan woman. But before I get there, I kind of want to just talk about water for a little bit. Let's get a little view of the water. So as you can tell, we're kind of in a pond-like area, maybe a small lake / big pond. And here's the beautiful thing about water. Did you know that still water is actually not really sanitary? Still water really collects algae, and it collects disease, it collects dirt and trash, and it doesn't wipe those things out. There is a beauty to living water that actually cleanses things. Moving water heals. That's why the shower is moving water on you. If you were sitting in a bath, you don't get as clean in a bath. But moving water is an aspect of cleansing. Now, it's funny, I was over in Mount Zion National Park couple months ago, and in Zion they actually have floods all the time. Basically, you have to wait before you hike the canyons to see if it's going to be flood day. Well, they haven't had floods in over a year. It's been a long time, and because of that, not having floods, they've actually had to close the park a couple times. And I'll tell you why they've had to close the park. They've had to close the park a couple times because the water sat so long that algae and poison and these deadly fumes produced. Dogs died, and they had to close the park. What I'm trying to say is still water does nothing for the soul. Still water doesn't cleanse you. But Jesus, being that living, moving water, is amazing. It's important. That living water is what can really bring life to the human soul. So with much ado, I'm gonna dive into the passage in John 4 with you guys. You guys do have your Bibles, maybe you don't, but just follow along with me. I'm gonna pop this on the screen for you. John 4 at verse 7 says this: "A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, 'How is it that you, a Jew, asks for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans.' Jesus answered her, 'If you knew the gift of God and who it was that's saying to you, "Give me a drink," you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water.' The woman said to him, 'Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get this living water?'" I want to stop right there. Let's just think about that for a moment. There's a couple things in that passage that are beautiful, and I just want to make a couple assessments of this passage. The first assessment I like to make is the divine mercy and the divine love of Jesus and what he's representing in this story. If you don't know much about Samaritans, let me give you a little history. About 586, there was this big epic battle that happened in Judah and Jerusalem. It was a destruction of Judah, right, the southern kingdom. And what had happened is Babylon had taken over the Israelites, and they had taken many of them captive. Only the good ones, only the best of the best. You know the story of Daniel when he was over there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was from after they had captured Israelites. Well, there was a group of Israelites that had stayed in Jerusalem, that had stayed in the southern kingdom and northern kingdom, or one of those two. And what had happened is that they chose, because there wasn't many of them, to intermarry and to have interrelationships with other people. And this created what was so-called half-breeds, half-bloods of Jewish descendants, half-bloods of Israels. And because of this, when the Israels were given from the Persian king, the process of coming back to their kingdom, There was a bunch of half-breeds, people that were half Jew, half not Jew, and believed in different faiths and mixed idols and mixed beliefs and spiritualization of what they all were rooted in. And so they casted down, they called them Sumerians, they had cast them down, and they basically persecuted them, and they hated each other. We know that there were times that the Samaritans would build a temple and the Jews would destroy it. There was this feud going on. Well, let's fast forward to Jesus' time. During this time, Jews, like it says here, had no dealings with Samaritans. What that means is that Jews didn't really deal with Samaritans well. For example, if someone was going to Samaria and you were a Jew, you would actually walk the other way. You'd walk the other way around because you didn't want to even see one Samaritan. If I was supposed to go here, I would walk around and I'd move around because I did not want to have any dealings with any Samaritans. That's how mad they were in their hearts about these half-breeds. They didn't even call them, they thought that they were gonna go to hell because of this. I mean, they had this bad heart. Well, Jesus was going through Samaria, and it's interesting that Jesus actually went through the actual road of Samaria. He went there and he went to the well. And what's interesting about this passage is he meets a woman at the well, but it's midday. Now here's the second thing I want to point out. If a woman is coming in the midday in the heat of the day, there must be a reason for it because most women would draw water early in the morning and probably later in the evening. Why? It's less hot. So why would a woman by herself go to draw water? Well, we find out later in the passage that she was a sinful woman, a woman who had many husbands, and the one she was with wasn't even her husband. And with this scenario, we know that she's ashamed. She's going to the well alone. So Jesus meets this woman at this well, and he knows that she's Samaritan, and he says, "Give me a drink." And you heard it. The Samaritan woman says, "Why do you, a Jew, ask for me for a drink?" And Jesus says to her, "Let me give you living water." What a beautiful story. Let's think about that. What an immaculate story about living water. Jesus has come to give this woman what we call living water. Basically what's happening here is there's a sinful woman coming, and Jesus has come to give mercy. He's come to give grace, he's come to give love. And this is the second assessment I want to point out to it. The living water is a sign of redemption, a sign of overflowing love to this woman, and a sign of righteousness. Why do I call that righteousness? There's a certain word they use to describe conversion. There's a Greek word they use. I don't know how to pronounce it well, but this Greek word actually signifies, it demands change. So when Jesus comes, you hear the gospel, it's actually demanding change. It's saying, here is mercy, here's grace. All the mistakes you've done, I've wiped away. But the only thing I demand of you, that you go and you sin no more. Now God knows we're gonna make mistakes, but this living water is a representation of living righteously, of actually getting something that is gonna satisfy you. Let me give you another assessment that I observed while I was studying this passage. There was this beautiful viewpoint of this woman comes with a jar of water to get water from this well. Well, what's gonna happen when she gets to her hometown and drinks the water? She's gonna have to go back and draw the same water every day. Now the water is gonna satisfy her for a moment. She's gonna feel satisfied, but Jesus says here that you will be thirsty again. This water, Jesus isn't talking about saying water is bad, but he's talking about her life. He's talking about water, that well, that drawing from that well, as a symbolism for the sins that she is struggling with. Saying, you continue to go to your husbands, your other men, your other people for life, and it might satisfy you for a moment, but you have to keep drawing back from it. You have to keep drawing back. I, the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who's come to save you, what I'm offering you is living water, where you don't have to draw no more, where there is no burden, where my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Jesus has come to give that freedom, and guess what? That freedom, it's available to you, and it's available to me. That freedom, that living water is available to us. The end of the story wraps up like this. Follow with me as I read. I'm going to start all the way in verse 27. It says, just then the disciples had come back. Jesus was getting water, he was alone at the well, the disciples were gone, and they had to come back while Jesus was talking to this woman. So they come back and they marveled that he was talking with the woman. Why? Well, because you shouldn't be talking to a woman, especially a Samaritan woman. But no one said, what do you seek, or why are you talking with her? So the woman left her water jar, went away into the town, and said to the people, "Come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?" I want you guys to ask that for yourselves. Do you believe in the Messiah? Is the Christ real to you? Is God real to you? Is that living water available to you? And if it is, are you willing to take from it? Are you willing to receive that water? That woman left her jar. What does that represent? What does that symbolize? What that woman has done is she's taken that jar, she set it down, and what she's saying is, this thing that I keep going back to, name the sin, name the struggle, name the thing, name the TikTok videos you do, name the Instagram and how many likes you get on your post on Facebook or Instagram, name how many friends you have at school, or if you're dating the cutest guy or the cutest girl, whatever it is that you keep drawing from that you think is gonna satisfy you. This woman set it down because she realized Jesus, the living water, is what satisfies me. She becomes the first evangelism in the book of John. And that's a big role. She goes into the city, and it says that many of the people in that city believed because of this woman's testimony. So let me give you a short synopsis. This man, Jesus, comes. He offers living water. He gives you that water. He comes. The woman receives it. She takes what she draws from the dead water, the water that may satisfy you for a moment, but there's algae in it. There's dirt in it. She sets that thing down. She trades it for the truth in the living water. And she goes and she sets other people free because of it. I challenge you today. Do you want to receive that living water? Is that living water a real thing to you? Do you want to receive it, and do you want real change in your life? I pray that you get that change, and I pray that as Tammy comes up, or maybe Justine comes up, that you take a moment to pray to either receive that living water or you choose not to. But I can tell you one thing, if you taste that living water, you won't be thirsty again. Jesus, when you go all out, satisfies your souls.